Everything falls into place when you stop trying to control everything, and these 7 Stoic truths are the exact mechanism that makes that possible, not vaguely, not eventually. In the specific ordinary moments of your actual life, the morning that started wrong, the person who disappointed you, the version of yourself you keep failing to become. Here is something most people get completely wrong when they first encounter Stoicism. They treat it like emotional suppression, like the goal is to feel less, care less, want less. And that misreading destroys the entire benefit. There is one truth on this list, the 5th one, that looks, on the surface, like the most passive idea imaginable. It will look like giving up. I promise you, it is the opposite of giving up. I will show you exactly what it actually means when we get there. For now, type one word in the comments. What is the one thing in your life right now that you cannot stop thinking about but cannot seem to fix? You already know what it feels like when your life is not falling into place. You do not need me to describe chaos or crisis. The specific texture of it is more mundane than that. It is the morning you wake up with the low-grade dread of an unresolved situation. The conversation you keep replaying at 2 a.m., editing your responses, improving your performance in a scene that is already over. The relationship that requires constant management. The goal that keeps moving. The version of yourself you plan to be by now, and the gap between that version and the one that showed up today. The cost is not dramatic. That is what makes it so exhausting. It is not one catastrophic thing. It is the steady daily drain of mental energy spent on things you cannot change, people you cannot control, and futures you cannot guarantee. Seneca noticed this in his own life, a man of enormous privilege and enormous anxiety, and he wrote about how we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The mind creates suffering by rehearsing the worst and mourning the past, neither of which exists anywhere except inside the mind doing the rehearsing. What he was pointing at was not a philosophical abstraction. It was the specific measurable cost of misdirected attention. That is the core of what this video is about. Not 7 rules to memorize, not a productivity system. One central insight expressed 7 different ways at 7 different levels of depth until it actually changes how you move through your day. The insight is this: almost all of your suffering is not caused by your circumstances. It is caused by your relationship to your circumstances. And that relationship is the one thing, the only thing that is entirely, completely, always within your control. This does not mean circumstances do not matter. It does not mean injustice is fine, or that grief is wrong, or that ambition is somehow spiritually inferior. The Stoics were not pacifists. Marcus Aurelius led armies. Epictetus survived slavery. Seneca built an empire. What it means is that the relationship between what happens to you and what you do next is mediated by something, a space, a judgment, a choice, and that space is where your actual power lives. The first truth is the foundation, and it sounds deceptively simple. Most of what you worry about belongs to someone else's column. The Stoics made a clean distinction between things that are up to us and things that are not. Epictetus built his entire philosophy on this single dividing line. Your opinions, your intentions, your choices, your responses, up to you. Everything else, other people's behavior, outcomes, reputation, the weather, the economy, what your family thinks, not up to you, not even a little, not partially, not with enough effort or the right approach, just not yours. Picture a Sunday afternoon. You sent an important message 3 days ago and have not heard back. You have checked your phone 47 times. You have drafted and deleted a follow-up. You have told yourself a story about what the silence means, about whether you are respected, valued on solid ground. You have burned an afternoon and a night on something that belongs entirely to the other person's column. The decision to respond is not yours. It was never yours. And yet you spent real hours of your finite life managing a decision that someone else is going to make on their own timeline, regardless of how many times you refresh the screen. The psychological mechanism behind this is well understood. We are wired to seek control because uncertainty triggers a stress response. The brain interprets unresolved social situations as potential threats, and the anxiety you feel about the unanswered message is the same system that once helped your ancestors survive uncertain environments. But the misdirection of that response, applying it to situations where control is not available, does not reduce the uncertainty. It just consumes the energy you could have spent on something actually within your reach. The reframe is this: the anxiety is not a signal that you need to do more. It is a signal that you have misidentified who owns the problem. Starting today, When you feel the pull of obsessive attention on an unresolved situation, ask one question. Is the next move mine or theirs? If it is theirs, remove yourself from the equation, not forever, not unkindly, but temporarily and deliberately. Redirect the energy to something in your column. This is not indifference, it is accuracy. The second truth escalates the first. It is not enough to stop managing what is outside your control. You have to actively build something inside it. Here is the difference between Stoic detachment and passive resignation, and it matters enormously. Resignation says, I cannot control outcomes, so nothing I do matters. Stoic philosophy says the opposite, because outcomes are not yours. Your effort, your character, and your attention are the only things that are truly yours, which makes them infinitely precious, not worthless. Think about the person at work who puts enormous energy into managing how they are perceived, tailoring every communication for maximum impression, playing political games, monitoring how their contributions are received. The energy expenditure is real. The control they gain is illusory, because what other people think is never fully accessible, and the performance required to maintain the impression becomes its own kind of trap. Meanwhile, the person next to them, putting the same hours into actually becoming better at the work, not performing competence but building it, is accumulating something that compounds. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly. He was emperor of Rome. He had more external power than almost any human being in history, and his private journals written to himself, never intended for publication, are filled with reminders to focus on the quality of his own actions, not their reception. He understood that the thing he could actually control was not Rome, but how he showed up in Rome. Psychologists describe this distinction as the difference between performance goals and mastery goals. Performance goals are tied to how you look relative to others. Mastery goals are tied to your own growth relative to your previous self. The research consistently suggests that people oriented toward mastery are more resilient to failure, more motivated over time, and more satisfied with their work because the metric is always accessible. You can always measure yourself against yesterday's version of you. The reframe: you are not here to manage your image, you are here to build your character. Those two things look similar from the outside and feel completely different from the inside. Starting today, identify one area where you have been performing competence instead of building it. Do one thing in that area purely for the skill, not for how it looks, not for the response it generates. The third truth is where the Stoic framework starts to feel a little uncomfortable, because it asks you to change your relationship to something modern culture insists is always good: wanting more. Desire in the Stoic framework is not inherently wrong, but there is a specific form of desire, the kind where your present moment is held hostage to a future outcome, that is consistently described by the Stoics as the primary source of human suffering. Seneca put it sharply: the person who has enough but does not know it is the poorest person alive. You have experienced this. You set a goal, a number, a title, a relationship, a body, a bank account, and you tell yourself, explicitly or not, that you will feel okay once you get there. The goal functions as a kind of permission slip for contentment. And the specific damage this causes is not that the goal is bad or wrong, it is that it trains the mind to locate peace in the future, which means peace is always one step ahead of where you are standing. You reach the goal, the permission slip expires, and the next goal takes its place. The horizon never arrives. This is sometimes called the hedonic treadmill in psychology, the well-documented tendency for humans to return to a baseline level of satisfaction relatively quickly after positive changes. Lottery winners, after a period of adaptation, report similar happiness levels to people who did not win. The mechanism is adaptation. The mind adjusts its baseline to whatever the new normal is, and desire reorganizes itself around the next increment. Here is the counterintuitive part. The Stoic response to this is not to stop wanting things. It is to want the right things in the right way, to hold desires with what Epictetus called reservation. The understanding that you will pursue the goal and will be fine if it does not arrive on schedule. Not because the goal does not matter, but because your well-being is not legitimately dependent on its arrival. The reframe: the contentment you are deferring is available now, not instead of the goal, alongside it. Starting today, write down one thing you are waiting for before you allow yourself to feel settled. Then ask whether there is any honest reason why the feeling has to wait for the thing. Here is a question I want you to sit with for a second. When was the last time you were completely present in a moment without already preparing for the next one? The fourth truth is this: the obstacle is not in the way. The obstacle is the way. This is the idea that Ryan Holiday popularized, but it comes directly from Marcus Aurelius, who described it as follows, paraphrased. What blocks your progress forward, if you use it rightly, advances your progress forward. The impediment to action becomes the action. Picture a career setback, a project that failed publicly, a role you did not get, a decision that looked foolish in hindsight. The conventional response is to treat the setback as the problem and recovery as the goal to get back to where you were before the obstacle arrived. The Stoic response is to recognize that the obstacle itself contains the information, the growth, and sometimes the redirection that the plan you were executing did not. The failure was not the interruption of your development, it was your development. This is not motivational reframing in the shallow sense. It is a specific claim about how competence and character are actually built. They are not built in the smooth execution of plans that work. They are built in the navigation of plans that fail. The software engineer who has debugged the most broken systems knows the most about how systems work. The relationship that required the most honest conversation produced the most genuine closeness. Difficulty is not the enemy of growth. It is the primary mechanism of it. Psychologically, this connects to what Carol Dweck describes as a growth mindset, the belief that abilities are developed through effort rather than fixed by nature. People who see obstacles as information rather than verdicts on their adequacy are more likely to persist, more likely to adapt, and over time, more likely to reach the outcomes they originally wanted. The reframe: the obstacle you are most frustrated by right now is the most important thing in your curriculum. Starting today, take the obstacle you most want to get past and ask what it is trying to teach you before you get past it. Write one thing. Just one. If you have made it this far, you are already thinking differently than most people who click on a video like this. Most people are looking for permission to feel better without changing anything. You are still here, which means you are willing to actually look at the uncomfortable parts. That matters more than you might think. If this has been useful, if even one of these ideas has landed differently than the usual self-help framing, hit the like button right now. Not as a transaction, as a signal to yourself that you are taking this seriously. It also helps this video reach people who need it and would never find it otherwise. And the fifth truth is coming up, the one I told you about at the beginning, the one that looks like giving up and is actually the sharpest edge on this entire list. Keep going. The fifth truth is the one that stops most people cold. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. And I promised you it was not about passivity, so let me show you exactly why it is the opposite. The Stoics returned to death constantly, not morbidly, not nihilistically, but as a practical tool for clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself regularly that the emperors before him were gone. The cities they ruled were changed beyond recognition, and the concerns that occupied them were forgotten entirely. Epictetus told his students to practice imagining the loss of everything they valued, not to induce despair, but to sharpen appreciation. Seneca wrote that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Here is what the contemplation of death actually does when you use it correctly. It removes the illusion of infinite time. And the illusion of infinite time is the primary source of procrastination, of deferred conversations, of relationships maintained at surface level because there is always later, of ambitions kept safely vague because there is always next year. When you remove the illusion, when you genuinely internalize that this specific conversation, this specific day, this specific version of the people you love is not going to be available indefinitely. Something shifts in what deserves your attention. The petty grievance loses its grip. The risk you have been calculating becomes more clearly worth taking. The person you have been meaning to call becomes someone you call today. Terror management theory, developed by psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Piszczynski, describes how awareness of mortality influences human behavior. Most people respond to mortality awareness by pursuing symbolic immortality, legacy, status, belonging to something larger than themselves, which is not necessarily wrong but is often misdirected into status, competition, and conformity. The Stoic approach is different. Use mortality awareness not to seek legacy, but to concentrate presence. The goal is not to be remembered. The goal is to actually be here, fully, while here is still available. The reframe. Death is not the enemy of a good life. The forgetting that death is coming is the enemy. Starting today, ask yourself once, not obsessively, not morbidly, just once, if this were the last version of this day you ever had, what would you do differently? Then do that thing. The sixth truth is where the philosophy gets genuinely interpersonal, and it is sharper than people expect. You cannot change people, and trying to is the most expensive habit you have. You know someone, maybe several someones whose behavior you find difficult. You have tried explaining directly and indirectly. You have tried patience. You have tried space. You have tried the conversation again with better framing. You have spent real emotional capital attempting to produce a change in another person that they have not yet chosen to make. And the cost of this project is not just the energy spent. It is the resentment that accumulates when the investment does not produce the return, and the slow erosion of the relationship itself under the weight of your expectations. Epictetus was unambiguous about this. Paraphrased, you have no more power over another person's choices than you do over the movement of the sun. Their character, their decisions, their pace of growth, not yours. What you can influence is the example you set, the environment you create, and the clarity of what you will and will not accept in your own life. The psychological concept of the fundamental attribution error is relevant here. We consistently overestimate the role of character and underestimate the role of situation when explaining other people's behavior, which means we often pathologize patterns in others that are actually responses to context, not fixed features of who they are. The person you are trying to change may not be the problem you have diagnosed them to be. And even if they are, even if the assessment is entirely accurate, the attempt to change them from the outside does not work and never has. This truth is sharp because it requires you to redirect enormous energy away from a project that feels important and toward a question that feels uncomfortably personal. What is it about their behavior that you are allowing to have this much power over your state? The reframe. The energy you spend trying to fix people is energy you are stealing from your own development. Starting today, identify one relationship where you have been trying to manage someone else's behavior. Then ask what you would do with that energy if you genuinely released the project. The seventh truth is the most counterintuitive, the highest stakes, and the one that ties everything else together. It is this: the good life is not the life where things go well. It is the life where you go well, regardless of how things go. This is the resolution of the open loop. This is why Stoicism is not passivity and not suppression and not giving up on the things you want. It is the recognition that your well-being, your actual felt experience of being alive is not a function of external conditions. It is a function of your orientation to those conditions. And orientation is the one thing that is always, completely, in every circumstance, yours. Here is why this lands differently than it initially sounds. Most people operate from an implicit contract. The world owes them a certain stability, fairness, and reciprocity. And when the world fails to deliver, when the project collapses, when the relationship ends, when the health scare arrives, when the economy shifts, they experience not just the event, but the additional suffering of a violated contract. The sense that this is wrong, that it should not be this way, that they are owed a different experience than the one they are having. And that layer of suffering, the argument with reality, is often more painful than the underlying event. The Stoics did not believe the world owed them anything, not because they were pessimists, because they understood that reality does not negotiate. What exists, exists. What has happened, happened. And the energy spent arguing with what is already true is energy removed from the only place it could ever be useful, the present moment, in your column, under your control. This is the paradox I promised you. The Stoic, who expects the least from circumstances, is not the one who suffers the most. They are the one who suffers the least because they have removed the invisible extra layer of suffering that comes from arguing with what is. They still feel the loss. They still grieve. They still fail and hurt and want. But they do not add the suffering of resistance to the suffering of the thing itself. And here is what that actually looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not a single moment of enlightenment. It is the quiet Tuesday morning where something goes sideways and you notice the familiar pull toward anxiety or resentment, and you feel it, acknowledge it, and choose deliberately to return to your column. What is mine here? What can I actually do? What is the next right action from where I actually am? That choice, not once but repeatedly, not perfectly but directionally, is the practice. And the practice over time produces something that looks from the outside like resilience and feels from the inside like freedom. Picture a version of your day where this has become the default. You wake up and the morning is not perfect. There is a problem waiting, an inbox with friction, a plan that needs revising. And you notice that the dread is lighter, not because the problems are smaller, because your relationship to them has changed. You assess, not catastrophize. You act on what is yours, release what is not. The difficult conversation you have been avoiding, you have it cleanly, without the weeks of rehearsal first, because you have stopped managing how it will land and started focusing on what you actually mean. The person who disappoints you, you feel the disappointment. You do not add the 5 stories around it. You do not spend 3 days in your head building and dismantling a case. You feel it and return. The goal you are working toward, you work toward it with full effort and without the hostage situation. You are not waiting for it to arrive before you allow yourself to be settled. You are settled and working. That combination is rare. It is also the most productive state available to a human being. The work you do from that place is different. Not because the work has changed, because you are different while doing it. More present, less defended, less in your head, less performing, and more building. The quality of your attention, which is the most valuable thing you can offer in any area of your life, improves dramatically when you stop splitting it between what is yours and everything that is not. The relationships you have from that place are different, not because the other people have changed, because you have stopped trying to change them and started showing up as the clearest version of yourself. And the clearest version of yourself is reliably more magnetic, more honest, and more capable of genuine connection than the version managing impressions and outcomes. The chaos does not disappear. Let me be clear about that. The difficult people stay difficult. Plans still fail. The world still refuses to negotiate. What changes is that the chaos stops having jurisdiction over your interior state. It happens around you while you remain, not unaffected, but unmanaged by it. You feel the weather without becoming the weather. For the next 7 days, do one thing. Every morning, before you look at your phone, ask yourself one question. What is actually mine today? Not what is urgent, not what is being asked of you, not what you are afraid of losing or missing or failing at. What is genuinely, legitimately only yours, your effort, your attention, your response, your choice. Write it down if you need to. One sentence. Then spend the day working from that list and releasing the rest. At the end of the 7 days, you will not be transformed, but you will have built 7 data points, 7 days of evidence that the life you have been waiting for does not require any of the conditions to change. It requires you to change your relationship to the conditions. That is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the only thing. The quotable line to carry with you: you cannot control the wind, but you can always adjust the sails. Leave one word in the comments, just one that describes what you are choosing to put back in your own column. That one word is for you, not for the algorithm. It is a commitment, small and public, which makes it more likely to stick. And if this landed for you, subscribe, because the next video goes even deeper into the Stoic frameworks that make this practical in the hardest moments, not just the easy ones. Thank you for being here. Stay sharp.